Hello, welcome to the Ensemble Experience, a podcast series by the Choral Arts Society of Washington, where choir members turn the spotlights on each other. Each episode brings two voices together to share personal stories, memorable moments, and the history they created within our choir. Discover the bonds and experiences that make our choral community unique.
Hey, everybody. I'm Virginia Panko, and I have been a member of the Choral Arts Society of Washington since 1997. So I've got, what's that, 28 years in as a wonderful chorus member and a proud member of the alto section, and joined here by Candy Stroud, who is also a fellow alto. Candy, how about you? When did you start?
Hey, Virginia. I called Shirley the other day and I said, Shirley Scribner, Norman's widow, the founder of Choral Arts. And I said, do you remember when I joined? And she said, yeah, I think it was 1971.
Oh my
So
goodness.
somewhere around 53, 54 years. However, there were years when I was writing a book on Carter, the Carter campaign. I took the year off. And I remember there were other years when I was working on presidential campaigns, either covering or working at the DNC or being part of the campaign, where I would say to Norman, "Hey, I'm off for, X months, and I'll see you for the Christmas concert, or I'll sing the, spring concert." So it's been a while. I figure it's about I've tried to do the math, and of course, Joe has told us be careful about the math.
I love it.
130 concerts and about, I don't know, somewhere around 5,000 hours of rehearsal and something like that. It's a lot of singing over those years and a lot of
Um,
fives.
how many concerts? I think I talked over you.
I think about 500, 530, something like that. If you count the runouts, or you count the tours, I've done all the tours. So on a tour, you're doing like five, six, seven concerts. And then, the Christmas concerts, we would do about three of those. And then we do the fall concert, Martin Luther King, the Christmas tree, the spring concert, and then, um, um, 4th of July. It, it,
Yeah.
it,
How did you originally, because you're one of the originals, how did you end up getting involved in choral arts in the first place?
I went to a party at the Georgetown Club with my husband, Frank Stroud, and Norman was there. I think it was given by Steve and Tamara Strickland, who were original board members. And I had this long conversation with Norman. I just bonded with him, as we all did, this most wonderful human being. And he said, "Well, I had just come from New York, where I had been singing with the Canterbury Choral Society under the leadership of Charles Dodsley Walker, who also ran the Blue Hill Troupe and Canterbury, and had just finished the Bach B minor. And I think that was our first concert at Choral Arts that I did. It was Bach, either Shirley thinks it was the Bach B minor or the Verdi Quattro Pezzi Sacri. So I was up to speed to join.
Absolutely. Well, I got started, like I said, first in 1997. I moved to DC from Denver in 1993. And I wasn't singing when I was in Denver. I was only in Denver for about 2 years, and didn't have time to join a choir in the middle of work. At that point in my life, I was doing marketing for shopping centers. So I got picked up by a headhunter and ended up getting the job being the head of marketing for Potomac Mills. Well, when I moved to DC, I loved it. And I remember looking in the newspaper. Everybody has to remember this is pre internet days. There was no internet. Literally looking in the Washington Post classifieds, and there was an ad, come audition for the Choral Arts Society of Washington. And I didn't even look it up. Again, pre-internet. What did we know? And I remember auditioning for Norman, and he asked me to come in that summer, literally immediately, like 2 weeks later. And so I sang during the summer under a different conductor. I believe we were out at Wolf Trap doing Verdi Requiem with the NSO. And so that was sometime in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I was one of two altos in the fall that September. And here's something funny. So in choral arts, we have the back row altos.
Yep, the bras.
The bras.
Yep.
And I made the mistake of sitting in the back row, right on the aisle. And I got looks as people walked by me. I learned the next week that I should sit in a different place. They were delightful and very gracious, but it's like I had not yet been invited to join the back row altos, where I later sat.
We were a clique and didn't know it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, when I joined, Choral Arts was literally a mom and pop operation. And I had no sooner joined and sung the Quattro Pezzi Sacri and the Verdi Requiem, not the Verdi, what was it, the Bach B minor, that we had, I was invited to join the board. And so I went to board meetings, and they were held in those days at Norman and Shirley's. Shirley was in charge of selling tickets for our concerts, and they didn't have enough chairs for us to sit. And so we sat on the floor for the board meetings. We've come a long way since then, when Choral Arts was one of 57 choruses in Washington. We're very blessed in this town to have so many wonderful choruses. And so it was my mission, really unknowingly, not even thinking about it, but I did want to put choral arts on the map, which is what Norman was sort of aiming at. So how do you do that? So I remember Frank and I used to have, every time we had a concert, we would invite all of our friends and have maybe 10 or 15 people come. We would buy tickets for everybody and then have a dinner party and then take them to the concert. Of course, half of them showed up late, but that's all right. What we were doing really inadvertently was building a donor base. And so as the years went on, we had these people who were available, A, to donate, B, to join the board, C, when we got to the 25th anniversary, it was easier to say to them, hey, you've been coming all these years as our guests. How about giving us $5,000 or $10,000 and we will give you your full page bio and photo. It was 2-page spread. On the left was full page photo, and on the right was their bio. So everybody was like, yeah, sure, well, do that. So we raised a lot of money for that one. That was a lot of fun.
It's always great. People love seeing their name in print, especially in the Kennedy Center.
There you go. Yes. And so that was that sort of began to, build our reputation because, when you think of the fact that there are so many good choruses, and then you have to really use PR to help each other stand out. Not that we're not the best, we are.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Choral Arts was really lucky to have you and a number of other people on those original boards, because you were plugged in not only into social Washington, but political Washington, federal government, presidential level. plus all of your media contacts from your time at CNN, and working with, working with
As a journalist,
media,
yes.
yeah, media at the network level.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a real kind of leg up for Choral Arts, and all of the stuff that you helped build.
But I
In
also
time.
remember that Norman was a real gem. Why is that? Because not only was he a genius, I mean, there were times when it was so difficult, trying to balance a full-time job, three children, elderly parents, and singing. And I said to Frank, I just can't do this anymore. And he said, wait, no, no, no. He said, when you have the opportunity in life to work with a genius, you got to keep that. And that was Norman. So Norman was not only a genius, he was local. So he knew everybody. He had, gone to Peabody. He was the keyboard artist for the National Symphony. And so he had really good relationships with the symphony. So anytime they needed a chorus, they just picked up the phone and called Norman. And that was sort of the beginning of a, really good relationship with the National Symphony and with many other conductors. And Leonard Bernstein loved Norman.
Well,
He had
we did the mass that opened the Kennedy Center. That was
Choral Arts opened the Kennedy Center. I was a journalist, if you can believe it, back then. And I remember walking up the steps of the concert hall. Maybe it was the Opera House. It might have been the Opera House.
no, I
I
think opera. I think concert hall. I'm not sure.
but I was right behind Roger Stevens and Jackie Kennedy taking notes. And that picture was on the wall of the Kennedy Center where you could come out on the A level, and get on
Mhm.
the escalator to go upstairs. That picture of me behind Jackie Kennedy and Roger Stevens was on the wall for probably 40 years. I think they only recently took it down.
Didn't Carter appoint you to the Kennedy Center board?
Clinton.
Clinton
No, Clinton.
appointed you to the Kennedy Center board
Yeah,
first.
I was a commissioner for the President's Advisory Commission on the Arts for the Kennedy Center. Yes. Yeah. But Bill Clinton was an interesting dude who I worked at the DNC during the Clinton administration, and but I never really had a conversation with him. But you sang and I sang many of the Kennedy Center honors. One of
Exactly.
those honors, you will recall, we sang for a Welsh tenor who nobody had heard of. I had never heard of him. A very difficult name, Bryn Terfel. And we were backup for Bryn Terfel, and Bill Clinton was in the president's box. He did come to the honors, he and Hillary. And I saw him from Bryn Terfel was in the spotlight. We were in the shadows, and we're singing. And Clinton literally leans forward, crosses his hands on the balcony, puts his head on his hands, and just was transfixed. And through that whole Bryn Terfel thing, whole performance. And the next night I saw him at a party at the White House, and we're going through the receiving line. I said, "Hey, hi, Mr. President. I got to sing for you last night and I observed that you were really transfixed by Bryn Terfel. He literally pulled me out of line. He wanted to talk about that. Hillary was like, "Where are you going? Where are you going?" And he was just so dazzled by that performance. He was such a consummate musician himself. And one time I had a conversation with him at a fundraiser for Terry McAuliffe, and I had just read the article in the New York Times about how many successful people are musicians, whether or not it's Virginia Pankow or and I mean, people like Jim Wolfenson, people like Paul Azan, people like Woody Allen. All these people played instruments, right? Um, it was David Krieger, played the violin. And Clinton looked at me and he said, "I never would have been president if I didn't play the saxophone." I, I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Because these are his exact words." He said, Music teaches you, making music teaches you to think differently. It makes you realize how important it is to be part of a team. It's a team effort. It teaches you cooperation with a large group of people. And that's why I was president.
I love it. So my Bill Clinton story that also relates to choral arts, in addition to doing Kennedy Center Honors and Capital Fourth, we get the opportunity to do all of these really unique and wonderful experiences. Well, we were invited to do the celebration at Ford's Theater. So we are we're spread out on the stage. We did oh my gosh, Battle Hymn of the Republic with Kathleen Battle. And we did, anyway, so the end of the show, and again, this is big televised. So President Clinton and First Lady Hillary and Al Gore with his foot in a boot because he had just like broken his foot
ACL.
and ACL and Tipper. And at the end of the show, the president comes up and gives closing remarks to the television audience and the audience sitting in Ford's Theater. And then we sing the final song, and Clinton went right back in, like 3 people down from me, and he is singing along. And there was
Singing.
huh?
What was
I can't remember. It was "God Bless America" or the national anthem, or some big closing patriotic something. I legitimately cannot remember what we were singing, but
amazing?
I know it was so funny. He shook hands and just came right back in, and he's standing on stage singing with us. When we did it the next year, it was the Bush administration at that point. And President Bush did not come back and sing with the choir.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
Tell me about it. Laura was singing along, but President W. Bush was not.
Yeah, W was not a singer.
It was so much fun. So much fun. We did have some amazing experiences doing Kennedy Center Honors. I remember doing Capital Fourth and being on stage. It wasn't quite the level of production that it is now. I remember being on stage in an absolute downpour with Audra McDonald. They actually just stopped the show and send everybody home because it was such a huge thunderstorm. And the next year was the year that we started recording the dress rehearsal so that the show could run on PBS in case of weather on the actual 4th. But I'll tell you, the other thing, which is, again, choral arts, but connected to President Clinton, I call it the millennial mess on the mall. And it was the turnover of 1999 to the year 2000. And we were the choir backing up the National Symphony on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial for the live show. There were live shows that counted down the new millennium. And Quincy Jones was the producer. And some of the backstage stuff, above the fact that we all got to say we sang back up to Bono, the backup stuff is, one, it was snowing, it was cold. President Clinton almost missed hitting the button to shoot the fireworks off at exactly midnight. But the day before, we were sitting in the Kennedy Center trying to track some of the music, because it's really hard to do it live at these events, so we were tracking backup. Mm-hmm. And Quincy Jones hadn't finished writing the music. So the symphony's sitting there. We don't have the music. We can't track anything. I think we got one thing tracked and everything else we're trying to do live. And in the middle of this, John Williams, 2 hours before the performance, is trying to hand us handwritten music in the tent to see if we can sing like 12 bars of ooh ah to open some other piece of the show. So those,
Yeah.
those are the adventures that
Yeah,
Coral.
we've done a lot on the fly. I mean, we've been so lucky, Virginia, to do some of the things that we have. I mean, when people ask me, what are some of your experiences with choral arts, they can't believe how lucky we are to have gotten to do some of these things. We sang, you weren't with us at this time, but we sang for the inauguration of Ronald Reagan. I'm not a Reagan supporter, obviously, worked for the DNC, but we sang for his inaugural, and I think it was Jesse Norman who was the soloist, the fabulous voice,
Mhm.
soaring out there. You know, we we got to sing the Rachmaninoff Vespers. Well, this was very funny, of course. Rachmaninoff Vespers happens to be my favorite piece. We sang it through Russia, and one incredible experience was that the Kremlin Chapel had been closed, through all the Soviet time
Mhm.
and all through the Cold War. The Kremlin Chapel is where the emperors of Russia had been crowned, the czars of Russia had been crowned. And when Napoleon came into Russia, the Kremlin Chapel is where he housed his horses. It was the
Oh, good
stable.
point.
But it's one of, I mean, and who had been in the Kremlin, But we got into the Kremlin and we sang in the Kremlin Chapel. It's all gold, all those beautiful icons and everything. Just this majestic place, small. It's not a large place, not like St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's small. And we sang the Rachmaninoff Vespers in there, in the words in the Russian that Rachmaninoff himself had composed, and in that chapel where all these czars had been crowned. It was the most extraordinary experience. Um, it's probably not one that a lot of people would pull out of their memory, but for me, it was just incredible, in this historic place that had been closed for so many years.
I
And
did not, I did not, I joined just after the Russia tour, but that Russia tour is a touch point with so many choral arts, current singers and past singers, alumni, board members. Um, Talk about your experiences with the NSO, with Slava, with that tour. I'm jealous.
I'm sorry you didn't get to do that one. That was special. Well, aside, I'll go into the singing in a minute, but I do remember we stayed in that Moscow hotel near Red Square, and we were told to bring little gifts for the chambermaids. Chambermaids, little, I don't know, a lipstick, pencils, pens, comb, something, I don't know, Listerine, and leave it on your pillow. And if you didn't, they might not clean your room so well.
Oh,
So I remember there was a little desk where you sort of checked in when you got off the elevator on every floor. It
mhm.
was all KGB, of course. And I remember going into my room, had forgotten to leave something on the pillow that day, and I had these white slippers that I had gotten when I got married, and they were all tattered and torn, but they were my wedding, you know,
Mhm.
slippers, and they were satin, and they were just all tattered and torn, but I loved them, and they were gone.
Oh,
So
good.
I came out and I said to the lady at the desk, "Chambermaid steal my slippers."
Oh, dear.
Chambermaid. So everybody went get into a flurry and everything. And lo and behold, I put a couple of lipsticks on the pillow that night, and Chambermaid brought slippers back the next day.
Well, there you go. There you go.
But anyway, but we were all a little bit concerned about going to Moscow at that time because there was a revolution going on. The Parliament building had been burned. As we were driving around Moscow, you could see the whole front of that white building. It was their White House, was all black from the smoke. Um, Rostropovich told President Yeltsin not to come out from the Kremlin. He didn't want, they were friends.
Mhm.
He didn't want to come out because he said, we have cannons. We're doing the 1812 overture to open in Red Square, 200,000 people. That's a lot of people. You can't tell what everybody's doing. And so he said, if cannons go off, they wouldn't be able to differentiate between that and a gunshot.
Mhm.
So it might not be a good thing for you to come out. So I'm standing in the front row, and it was freezing cold. Everybody's told the story about the symphony bought gloves in the metro there and cut the fingers off so they could, you know, play their instruments. And I'm standing there, we're about ready to sing that Alexander Nevsky, which is their victory piece. And out comes Yeltsin in his fedora and his overcoat. And he stood in the front row, came out of the Kremlin, stood in the front row right in front of us, and listened to the whole thing. That was quite impressive. Um, and singing with, we had this extraordinary soloist. Her name was Janice Chandler. I know you've worked with her.
Oh, yes, unbelievable. She was Norman's favorite person, one
She
of,
had an incredible voice.
and he mentored her.
Yes, and you know how old she was at the time? I
No.
think 19.
Wow.
And she had she had a voice like an angel. And she would sing um these gospel songs, Glory, oh Glory. And then she also sang He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And the Russians were just on the floor. And so I saw her sitting alone. She was very private. She was always reading the Bible. And I said to her, I sat down with her and I said, how do you produce that incredible sound? You sound like an angel. And she said, and I quote, I'm just up there conversating with God.
Wow.
And that's what it sounded like.
She
So
she she was absolutely extraordinary, and also in a time when African American soloists were not there weren't as many, and getting the opportunity to tour with the National Symphony and to tour Russia and to work with, you know, we consider ourselves a major symphonic choir performing at the Kennedy Center.
yes,
Norman found her voice and mentored her to an extraordinary career.
I wrote down, I went back to my Vespers score this morning and I looked up a couple of quotes from Slava because Slava was he had he had a lot of difficulty with the English language, but he managed to get out some wonderful quotes. And one of them was, we are all born on this planet to make the planet more beautiful. For God gave us spiritual healthiness because you are instruments of God. So God help you make planet more beautiful. That's why you sing so beautiful. Thanks to God, thanks to you, thanks to the music.
Wow. I love it when we get such amazing opportunities to interact with so many different conductors. I will completely skip to one of the most two extraordinary experiences with choral arts. I have this visual memory of the tour that we did in London with the London Symphony and our two sold out performances at St. Paul's.
That was 2008, and
That
Frank
was,
had died.
yes.
I couldn't go. Go ahead.
And looking out at that extraordinary space, and then Gergiev literally conducting with a toothpick. And
What?
no, that is a real thing. Everybody thought it was like a myth, but no, he conducts with a toothpick. So, and it's Mahler 8, it's Symphony of 1,000. We're doing it with the London Symphony Chorus and the youth chorus, boys choir, from one of the schools who I can't remember. There 400 of us plus on stage in these very, very, very vertical seating. And your view, the view from the stage is kind of one of my favorite experiences. But that was the view, two sold out performances and then a recording.
Yeah.
Oh, and then most recently, which is extraordinarily sad, was the Mahler 2 with Michael Tilson Thomas. One of his last performances of that
Yeah.
piece,
Yeah, absolutely.
conducting. And what the audience doesn't see, that the chorus members see, no matter who's conducting, whether it's Marie, whether it's Scott, whether it's Norman, whether it's Michael Tilson Thomas, whether it's Noseda, we see their face and
Yes.
we see their expressions and we
Yes.
see how they are communicating with the musicians and with us.
Who was the conductor? Um, we sang with him, and he brought us to Philadelphia, and we sang Beethoven Ninth there at the equivalent of Wolf Trap. Um,
Is that Yannick?
no, no, no,
No,
no.
no, 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 no. Who did
NSO
that?
conductor.
And
Um,
Slacken,
no,
Eschenbach.
thank you.
Thank
And
you. One of those. It's like,
and I remember we came off the stage after singing. Maybe it was probably the Beethoven Ninth,
it
and
was.
he went,
Yeah, I remember. I remember doing that concert because I remember that the benches were actual like wood slats. Like I got a splinter in my tush.
and we and do you remember we came off stage and he kissed every single one of us?
Yeah, I
You
do.
know,
I do.
absolutely, absolutely incredible. But I
Well,
also
but just back to Michael Tilson Thomas. Imagine that he he had tears rolling down his face as he conducted what he thought was his last. He's such a student of Mahler. His
Norman always used to say, and I think Scott said this to us as well, Scott Tucker, who
Mhm.
preceded Marie. Uh, Scott would say, or Norman said, you can correct me, whoever it was, you might be singing this to somebody who is hearing it for the first time. They may be hearing it for the last time.
that
And that
that
was
was Robert Shaw. When
so,
we did Beethoven 9 with Robert Shaw and the NSO, and it was his last Beethoven 9 because he died like 3 months later.
oh my God.
Yes,
But
that was
Norman
Robert
quoted
Shaw.
him. Norman then
Absolutely.
used that. Yeah. But I remember doing the Verdi Requiem and coming off stage, and this man came running up to us in the Hall Nations, and thank you, thank you, thank you. That was so spectacular. And he pulled this 2 foot long handkerchief out of his pocket, and he
Okay.
said, "You see this?" He said, "It is completely soaking wet because I cried through the whole thing. It was so moving. What you did was so moving." And and that's why, to me, singing with choral arts, what it means to me, I think it was to Norman, for sure it was to Norman. Norman was a minister's son. We used to call him, Frank used to call him PKs, preacher kids, the PKs. And so I think Norman always saw music as his ministry. He was a very deeply spiritual man. And they say, he who sings prays twice. And for me, singing for audiences that we have performed for, and the sacred pieces that we have been blessed to perform, whether or not it's the Brahms Requiem, the Verdi Requiem, the Schubert Requiem, all of these pieces. When you're singing the words, some of these words have been said and sung for thousands of years. Sanctus, 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 sanctus Dominus Deus Sabaoth. Those are the words it gives me chills to say them, the words that the angels sing around the throne of God. Or Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, dona nobis pacem, Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. Miserere nobis, have mercy on us. These are the words from the Mass that we are privileged to give breath and life to the audiences that may be hungry for faith or a spiritual experience that they may never ordinarily have. And so I feel some people volunteer and they, do so others may eat, or they, they deliver food to the poor or whatever, work for the Red Cross. For me, singing with the choral arts is m my community service, but it's also a spiritual ministry, um,
Wow.
for the,
That's
yeah, that we all get to do.
I have a certainly similar reaction. And when you get chills and you really feel like you're engaged with the audience, um, I do so appreciate the fact that with choral arts, though we aren't locked in to the sacred and the sublime, we are equally entertaining when we're when when
Yes.
when we turn into a gospel choir. Having
Oh,
been
fun.
yeah, with the Martin Luther King celebration, if I have this correct, we were right after Dr. King was assassinated. Again, they picked up the phone and called Norman. Uh,
Mm.
and Choral Arts was a part of that celebration of life, with the NSO and in DC, celebrating, or honoring Dr. King. But we're also equally, as adept. Thank you very much. Singing some country music, because I remember at Capitol Fourth we were doing a piece, and I'll be dinged if Vince Gill didn't walk into the rehearsal tent and sit down right next to me,
Really?
and joined the alto section. He was very appreciative, of joining the alto section there, in the tent at Capitol Fourth. It was a lot more relaxed when we got started. It's a
Yeah.
little more formal now. We don't have as much face-to-face interaction with the stars, but I think I've easily done 20, 22 Cap Force. So,
Yeah.
we done back up to the Beach Boys, Frankie Valli, Aretha Franklin. Did you sing the year that she had us change the words to Beethoven 9?
Come on.
And love and happiness, peace and love and happiness, peace and love and happiness, peace and love and happiness. And then, that is not her comfort zone. And she kind of got a little discombobulated, so there was some scat singing as she just kind of joined in and did her own thing, man, on the front of the stage, and the audience just loved it. But yep, we were singing peace and love and happiness. And who knew, when John Williams conducted us at Capitol Fourth, I don't think anybody realized that there are words to Revenge of the Sith from Star Wars. There are words. They make no sense.
Well, who knew that there were words to the 1812 overture?
Well, that is also true. What is Howard and everybody translate? It's all hail the Tsar. So we've all
Yeah,
been
that's right.
singing
Yeah. And why
all
would we
hail
do
the
that?
Tsar.
Yeah. I, I've done it. But I wanted to just mention Slava again because he was so
Okay.
funny. But Norman and I went backstage with him to try to convince him to perform on the cello at our 25th anniversary. And so he says, Norm, he called him Normchick. Normchick, you want vodka? Norman, no, of course, didn't drink, but I did. So he said, Kandushka, he called me Kandushka. You want Grey Goose? Sure. So we had some Grey Goose vodka, and we're sitting there. And what I remember about that meeting was that he told us that Prokofiev, who was his friend, had been banned by the Soviets, and so he had no money. He couldn't earn a living. So Slava would bring him breakfast every morning, so he had food to eat. And I'll never forget that story. And then what was the first piece that we did when we got to Russia? Prokofiev's Nevsky.
Oh, wow.
right?
How
Like a
amazing.
little thing. But he was very funny. He would say, Bassi, Bassi, I want you sound like hamburger. Not any hamburger, McDonald's hamburger. Bassi, Bassi. And then he would say, My dear colleagues in the orchestra, now das section 199. Das section 199. And my special compliments to soprani. He was he was precious. But and then he was like, where's Scribner? Scribner drink vodka? He was quite something. But
It's
um
it really is. Okay, so Choral Arts is headed into its 60th year. You were on the board. I was chorus president when when Norman stepped down and Scott arrived, and we were celebrating. You and I both were big parts of the 50th anniversary. But now we're headed to 60. What do you see? What do you see in the future?
well, what I hope in the future, every time I look out at our audiences who are so appreciative of what we do, but you see a lot of older people. And my biggest concern for the future is um, how do we help young people have an appreciation for the great works, whether, of the past, whether or not it's Pazzisacchi or Verdi or Beethoven how do we give them appreciation? All they listen to, as you see young people with their headphones on and they're just listening to pop music. How do we build audiences for the future? And for me, I think when Norman was around, I think we sent choruses to the schools, didn't we? We would be in the schools. I
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I think we did that, with Singers for All Seasons. We did nursing homes and small groups, and that was kind of our chamber chorus
Yeah.
of the time. Um, but we had volunteers who have now turned into teaching artists, actually, in the schools. And then Jan, I know, was Jan Childress, who is an alumni and an extraordinary writer, was a big part of helping create the curriculum around Dr. Martin Luther King and our doc, uh, Dr. Martin Luther King, the Living the Dream, Singing the Dream concerts,
Yeah.
celebrating him. So I know that there was a heavy focus on education, and that's a K through, I believe K through 12. It may be K through 8 curriculum that Choral Arts has that's available. That
Well, what I would love to see is to be able to bring in classes or an entire school to, let's say, a dress rehearsal or to one of our rehearsals, or to bring in young people to some of our Tuesday night rehearsals when we're getting closer to a concert. And they could sit up there in the balcony. Um, but we have got to bring in young people. We were very lucky last year. One of our concerts we were conducted by the woman who's in charge of 95 children's choruses in Chicago, Josephine Lee.
Yes, she was amazing.
She was absolutely incredible, although I'll never forget. We bonded over this because I would drive her home at night. The very first night she came in, are we almost out of time? We're close. Just a minute to tell the story.
Oh, we've got
She
time.
comes in and she is just dazzlingly attractive, right? I remember she had a black satin cargo pants and a little mini top that when she would raise her arms, you would see her bare midriff. And she had this gorgeous figure and gorgeous long hair. And she was the cat's meow. And speaking of which, point she's on the podium and she's this incredible conductor. And she turns to the sopranos and she goes, screams at a high decibel level. I couldn't repeat it. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Her knee came up to her chin. She's turned away. Like, we're all looking at each other. Were you there that night? I said, what happened? What
The
happened? What happened?
mouse.
There was a mouse. It's in the house.
I
This
do remember that.
incredible conductor, and she was absolutely intimidated by a little mouse. We laughed all the way home, but she would be somebody to that we should connect with in terms of her, working with young people and getting. She takes them all over Europe. She has all these choruses. She's going to
But we
develop.
we sang. Her chorus came and sang with us.
So we have to do more of that, more children, more young people, so that we spread the word about it's spreading the gospel of music, right? Not gospel of music,
Yes.
but gospel of music.
But it's
Amen.
also it's also the family. And that to me is really the biggest takeaway, having been in this chorus for 28 years. This chorus became my community. These are my people. These are my friends. These are my friends outside of
Yeah,
rehearsal. These are my buds.
yeah.
And this community has expanded because we cross choruses. Some of us sing in choral arts, and then you sing in the Washington Chorus, and then you sing in Washington Douglas Chorale, and then you sing in Capitol hearings, and people rotate in and out, and that just continues to build these concentric circles of friends that all have music as their common thread.
Denominator, common denominator. Yeah, what a thrill that is. But and also, choral arts singers are often quite intelligent people, I might say. Um, and so people like you and Karen Doyne and Ann Stommer have all come and worked for me at Democratic national conventions. And I would just say, take it away. You take it away. And,
I
just
think
like, you
I
know,
think I've grown out. I think I've grown out of being in Chicky and Pete's from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m.
we've all had our heyday with the conventions. Yeah, I did one this past summer. Again, my sixth. It's difficult. It's very difficult to do, but I could never have done it without my support system from the Choral Arts Society, plus the other people I brought in from Capitol Hill. But like you're a rock star, um, and so is Ann Stommer. I mean, you kept me sane, is what you did. You're so good at what you do, and you're so brilliantly organized. And it made what was a very difficult situation a joy. So I thank you for that. And you didn't always just do that. You did a bunch of radio rows with me when we helped pass the Obama Affordable Care Act with Families USA, and you did those radio rows with me. And
I did,
I
and
turn you loose.
that's really an example, because I'm certainly not the only person, but within the community of choral arts, I always say we're the best focus group in Washington, D.C., because of the breadth of experience that resides in our members. But more than that, it's the best network, both from a social, from an emotional, and a professional. And I will close this out by saying also from a relationship basis, because as we all know, there's a whole set of folks that have met in choral arts and gotten married, and or long-term relationships. So that is also a perk of being a chorus member.
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and of course, Frank sang with us. He got really, Frank Stroud was an incredible musician himself. He was octet champion of Illinois. He was a saxophone champion of Illinois many times. And but he wasn't singing with choral arts, even though he was an accomplished singer, because, he was a doctor on call all the time. But he just got so tired of my being gone every Tuesday night, he finally just gave in and said, I'm just going to come sing. And then in turn, they sang for him at his funeral. Norman came and we did the Morton Lords and
Yeah, I was
Luke
there.
Santana.
I was there. There were more Choral Arts members than could fit in
Yes.
the space for the choir. So the rest of us stood up. I don't even know if you saw, but the rest of us stood up.
I sang with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had two of my producers from CNN who came, and they said to me the night before at the wake, "You have to sing tomorrow." And I said, I couldn't sing at my husband's funeral. Are you kidding?" They said, "You have to. You really have to. You're a singer, and
Mhm.
these are your singers coming." So at one point, the man who organized the funeral came up to the front row, took me by the hand,
Mhm.
guided me down up the stairs to the choir loft, and literally Norman's hand was up, about to give the downbeat, and they shoved the music in my hand, and we off we went.
Off we
Never
went.
forget it. It was one of the greatest moments of my life. I was glad I was able to do that with all of you in Frank's honor.
Well, in Frank's honor, we'll close out our wonderful podcast. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to listen to our recollections, our memories, and gets excited about either being a phenomenal part of our audience or come audition and be a phenomenal part of the choral arts community. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Virginia. And thanks everybody as well.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Ensemble Experience. We hoped you enjoyed hearing these incredible stories from our choir members. Now, we'd love for you to experience the magic in person. Join us for our upcoming concert on June 15th at the Kennedy Center Concert Hall. As a special thank you for listening, use promo code POD20 for 20% off your tickets. Please visit choralarts.org/tickets to reserve your seat today. Again, that promo code is POD20, POD20. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the concert.